So, the rum producer now has molasses, sugarcane juice, or syrup. What's the next step? Well, first the molasses or syrup is diluted with water or sugarcane juice and turned into what is called mash. The quality of the water can make a huge difference in the final product, so many producers may filter the water if it's not up to their standards. The magical ingredient, yeast, is then added to the mash, which is then fermented in specialized tanks. Essentially, the yeast feeds on the mash and gradually converts it into alcohol. Eventually, a sugarcane wine will be produced which will contain around 8% to 10% alcohol. A fundamental stage in the development of the future rum's flavors, the fermentation of the sugarcane wine is actually conducted in various distinct ways in different parts of the world, which results in a very broad aromatic range. Let's take a look at 3 types of fermentation. The first of which is spontaneous or natural fermentation. Now, this relies on the yeasts and microorganisms that are naturally present in either the atmosphere or in the sugarcane juice. Spontaneous fermentation usually takes place in open vats and can take between 1 and 2 weeks to fully ferment. Since the fermentation process is longer using this method, it's usually only employed by smaller distilleries. The second type is controlled or batch fermentation. Now, usually carried out in batches, this kind of fermentation uses laboratory-grown yeasts that are added to the sweet liquid. Some distilleries even cultivate and maintain their own strains of yeast that they're highly protective of. Controlled fermentation is usually spread over 2 or 3 days and enables the production of a relatively consistent percentage of alcohol and range of flavors. The last type is known as continuous fermentation. It involves keeping a fermentation vat permanently filled with the continuous addition of more molasses. The advantage of this type of fermentation is that it enables the yeast to be kept active by just removing a quantity of the mash, whose sugars have already been digested by the yeast from the different sections of the vat. After the mash is fully fermented, it's now time to transfer it over to the still for distillation, which we'll cover in the next module, the distillation process.